So for this video, I'm going over the tutorial for next week, which will be to create an infinite scrolling list using Flutter only with no outside libraries. Hey guys, welcome to this new video form that I want to try out. It will be me going over the process of creating my tutorials. That means getting something to work that I have on my list and then refactoring throughout the entire time to get it to a point where I can present it to you guys as a solution to the problem that I'm trying to solve. This week, my camera died halfway through. It was also out of focus the entire time, so you won't have my face in the bottom left corner. It's also a lot longer. I'm not cutting out too much of the dead coding time, so it won't be as fast paced as my tutorials. If that's a problem, please let me know and I can figure out a way to keep these long and informative but still compact to match my tutorial styles. Without further ado, let's start the tutorial. Scroll Flutter project. I'll call mine continuous scroll, and once that's done, we can open up the project in Visual Studio Code. I find it more difficult to follow for myself personally, but I also don't want to have the code too small because you just won't be able to see anything. We can just clean up the main view a little bit, and then I'll set up a very basic app as I would have in a production code, which, if you don't know, I have a tutorial that covers my architecture, which is basically MVVM, model view view model, but without the two-way binding. That's the only difference that I've seen so far. So I can call it MVVM, but I don't want to call it that because it's not exactly that. So I just call it the provider architecture that I came up with. So I'm going to set up a basic one of that, and I'll just create a new file for the home view. So this won't be a follow along tutorial. That will come the following week. So I might cut out some parts of the code. I just want you to be able to follow the thought that goes into creating the actual final tutorial code. So all the steps might not be included, but I'll try to keep everything in the app. We'll import material, stateless widget. This will be we'll put our base view. Yeah, we'll use provider directly, so we can just add provider. I won't give it a version because it doesn't matter that much. So for this, we'll use a change notify provider like we always do. And if you don't know what I'm doing over here, please watch my architecture tutorial. It goes into depth. It's an actual full follow along tutorial. It goes into details about why the architecture is a certain way. You can follow along the steps and then see the reasons why I'm doing the things I'm doing now. I'm just going to go through it quickly so we can start with the implementation. So home view model class will be home view model that extends the change notifier. And change notifier is what you use to indicate to your UI side or to your listener that the UI data has been changed. And this allows you to rebuild your UI from the state of your model. And what we'll use is a string of items. I'm just going to expose that string as a property called items, and it will return the items. And what we'll do is in the constructor, we will generate the new items. Usually you would fetch this from a function and you'd use the onModelReady callback, and that will allow you to do an async request where you can show busy indicator and then fetch all of the items for your model. We're not doing that, so we'll just generate a list of string. We'll generate 15 items, and each item will return title and the index, and that should be it for now. Change notifier will be of type home view model, The builder expects a home view model that is created, so we'll just construct a new one. And then the child, in this child will have access to the home view model through either using provider of calls, or we can use the consumer, which will automatically rebuild whenever you call notify listeners on the model. This builder does not take a model. This is actually the UI builder function. So it gives you a context, it gives you back the model, and it gives you back a static child. This child, you use this child if you have some UI that will never be changed or updated through this build function, and you supply it through the child. If I want to supply some text, that will stay the same, like my title, but that's besides the point. And what we want to do here is return a list view, and we want to build that. Item count will be model.items.length. Item builder will give us the context and the index, and we'll return a container for now. Yeah, so let's do some basic styling. Let's do this while the app is running. I want to do the styling while the app is open so that we don't have to go back and adjust anything. Since it is not about the UI, it's just the functionality to keep on requesting more results. I want to get to that part quick, so I'll skip all the styling talk or anything like that, and we'll get straight there. So I just want to run the app, and once it's up, I'll continue in the home view. We just want to have a basic, I can actually just start writing the code for it. We'll have a basic container. The height will be 70. The width will be full. We'll give it some margins. I'm going to make the vertical margins more than the side. It looks better, but also because I want to have more spacing so that when we request our data, you can actually see the things happening instead of all the items being on top of each other. So we have 15 items. I'm going to do that. I'm going to give it some decoration. Give it a box decoration. Color will be white. We'll give it a box shadow. And this shadow will have a blur radius of 4, and the color will be colors. We'll use gray, and we'll use the shade 200. And you should see some a thick shadow. Okay, there we go. And then the child of each container will be model items, and we'll show the index. I think, yeah. Yep. We'll just put that inside of a text, which will go to the top left, and then we'll align that to the center. Now, as I said earlier, I want to request the new results based on the index of the item. So the first thing we need to do is add a callback function in some way that can tell us which item has been created. And we'll do that by moving all of our UI for the container itself into its own widget file, which will then allow us to override the init state and then fire off a callback function in a stateful widget that will give us the index of the item that has just been created. So we'll do that first and then just print out some values to see if it's working, and then we'll continue with the solution. For this list item container, I want to put that into its own file. I'll call it index aware list item. Naming will probably change afterwards, but for now, that sounds very nice. Stateful widget, and we'll call that index aware list item. Okay, so I still want the UI to be built on the outside so that you can use this in different lists. So we'll pass in the widget that we want to show. It'll be final. And then we'll pass that to the constructor for the build itself, we'll just return the widget. Then the other part we want is that we want a function that will tell us item, we call it item created. It is a function, it takes no parameters, and you can pass it in from the outside. We want to fire off this function once init state has been called. So all we'll do is we'll check if item created is not null. Based on that, we will execute the function. And now on the outside, we'll say index aware list item for the widget. I should have called that child because that is I'm going to call it child because that is the convention. So the child will be the UI passed in. And then, yeah, so my camera died. This is the first time doing anything with myself in the video, so I'm not used to checking anything besides my mic. So, yeah, where were we? Yes, let me restart this guy. So we built the index aware list item, and now build function must never return null. Not widget, child, widget.child. Okay, so there we go. We still have the functionality. Now let's just test out the index aware part. If I go item created, I just want to print out the index item at index created, right? So I want to use this so that I can, how do I get this thing back? View, I know it's Control Shift U, that's different. You see now, so, okay. So as I scroll, you can see that certain items are created. The last one is 14, and 14 is created pretty early on. By the time we get to the 11th item, then the last one is created. So there's a 3 item difference, it seems like. We'll use the full 15. So when we get to the 15th item, we want to request a new one. Meaning when the 15th item is created, we know there's only 3 left. So we want to start requesting the new information. The other thing that we can note as well is the fact that if we go back down, it will re-request again. So we have to make sure to don't request information once it's been requested. We'll come up with a solution for that once the original intended solution works. I'm just going to minimize this since I couldn't open it with the shortcuts. We know that's the case now, and we are creating 15 items at a time. I want to request new items when the index is 15. So I am going to create a static const list request threshold. It will be an integer. I'll set that to 15. And in here, what we'll do is we'll check if the index plus 1, meaning the actual count, not the 0 index position. If the item modulus 15 equals 0, then we want to request. But also, that can be true if the index is 0 itself. So if it's not 0, then we will do that. Yeah. And then what we'll do is call model request more data. And now we can go ahead and create this method. This will always be a future since you're requesting more data. You can make it async. And the way I like to show the busy indicator is by adding in a new index, by adding in a new item and then just displaying a busy loader inside of that item. To test it out, let's first build the UI so that we are not in the dark to know what we're looking for when we do add it. So I'm going to insert at 0. I'll insert the caret. That's what I'll use as a unique identifier to indicate that it's a busy item. And you can do the same thing. You don't have to use that. You can use your hash for your class that you're using, or whatever value you can make sure that it is a busy item. Usually if I have a complex class or data object, I'll just put the Boolean value in it, and I'll either set that to true or false. It'll be false by default, and when I create a busy item, I'll set that to true. And so we'll insert that at 0. Let's just refresh. So there should be that over there. And then now in the home view, I can check over here. Just to keep things simple, this will be a lot different. If this equals the caret, I want to show circular progress indicator. So there we go. So whenever we add a new item with this value, it'll show the circular progress indicator. Something I like to do is not have those kind of values floating around. So I'll create a constant string called loading indicator value. Set it to that. And I'll set that to this, and in the home view I will do that. And then so when we request, we want to show the loading indicator at the bottom, so we can just add it into the view. So we can create a function called show list item, show loading item, and what that will do is insert an item at the bottom with a value loading indicator value. And once that is there, we want to call notify listeners. And then we also want to hide, or instead of hide, remove loading item. We can either remove the value itself, loading indicator value, and then we can call notify listeners, or we can remove the last item by using remove last. But then you have to make sure that you remove before you add the new data. And for now, let's just do it this way, and I will do it another way. If there's any problems, we'll do it a different way. So the first thing we want to do when we request more data is obviously log that we are requesting more data, so we can see how many times we do that. And then my favorite thing is to delay a call. Gives you some kind of indication of how things will work. And then we're gonna go and say remove the loading item. Let's go to the home view. In the home view, if we reach the request limit threshold, which is 15, and the index is 0, we'll request more data. Right, so let's just restart this guy. Make sure we remove this from the view, the constructor. We'll restart. It should start off at 0, and when we get to 11ish, you should see an exception. And I actually struggled with this exception a bit, and it's because it's calling notify listeners while these items are still being built. I don't know why it's causing it in this build, but in a previous set of code that I built, nothing like this happened. It just rebuilt the model and then it re-rendered it, like all of it. But one way you can get past this is by calling schedule binding dot instance dot add post frame callback. This will call this function once after the view render has been completed. If we rebuild the code and we scroll up, we'll see request more data. It'll show the loading indicator, and then it should be removed after 5 seconds, which is perfect. And now it does it again, and that we're gonna have to fix. But we can only do that once we've added more data. So let's fake out all of that information. So when we do this, all we want to do at this point is say items. We'll generate some new information. New list items equals list of string. Generate 15 more. Gonna get to the index, and then we're gonna add in title. And because we don't have a page number, which we'll add in soon, I'm just gonna say, what was that now? I'm just gonna print out the title, new. We'll remove the loading item. We'll add the items, items.add all, new list items, and then we'll remove the loading item. So we'll sit over here for 5 seconds, and then it'll add all the new values, and then we'll sit over here again for 5 seconds, and it will add all the new values. And yeah, it'll keep doing that infinitely, continuously, and it's a pretty simple solution, I think, to the actual problem, which is requesting more information. Some people use the scroll controller, which you will then have to indicate an arbitrary number of pixels, which is different per device. So you're going to have to use percentages, and then based on certain things like the safe padding for the notches, those will differ, as I've seen before. So this is more reliable because you can choose which index you want to start requesting your information from. And yeah, so the first problem we have is, if you see down here, as you're scrolling, it keeps on requesting more data, even though you don't get back to the bottom. So one way to fix that, or the way I think I want to fix that, is by having a page number. We'll have integer page, we'll call it current page, and we'll set that to 0. When we request more information, we will update the current page, and the way we'll calculate the page value is, when we request the information, we will pass in the page number, and that will depend on the index. And I don't know if you know where I'm going with this. The index on the outside has a cool property to, whenever it gets to a certain point, if you divide it by the limit threshold, you'll get the page number for the next page. So if this gets to 15, so if index plus 1 gets to 15, if we divide that by the limit request threshold, let's just do var item number equals index plus 1. And so what we can do is simply take the item number divided by the threshold. Can't we do approximate? Why is that not working? US keyboard. Approximately divided by, this is like rounding, this is like putting to an integer. It's equivalent to this guy over here. So if you do that, it truncates the boolean, passes it through as an integer. So now when we request more data, we'll say request more data for page, and we'll print out page request. Right, so let's restart this guy, and if you go through now, you'll see it requests for page 1, and it loads that. And now we have the information for page 1, it goes to page 2, and it loads that. And the same with page 3, blah blah blah. But if you go back up, you'll see that it starts requesting page 1 and 2 again. So we'll only request a page if it's bigger than the current page. The first thing we'll do is we'll check if the current page if the page request is bigger than the current page. If it's same, we don't care. We only request if it's bigger. Let's see if that'll work. So request page 1, request page 2, request page 4. You see how messed up it is. And now once we go over that, we then have to set the current page equal to the page request. Otherwise it won't know. And so let's restart because the list is all messed up. Request page 1 loads. When it's done, request page 2 loads after decreases time. I'm gonna make it 2 seconds. Request page 3 unloads. And now when you go back up, nothing is requested. And also as you go back down, nothing is requested until you get to the new page. Perfect. So we fixed all of that. We can remove the to do. Don't request the information once it's been requested. And now the only thing left to do is nothing. I guess this is where you'll make your information request. And yeah, now I just want to see how we can make this easier to manage from the outside and how it's not. So the first thing I want to do is I first want to identify everything that can be put into, that can be taken out and abstracted in the sense that it's not required to be implemented. So for instance, if I look at the list view itself, the list view, the user of the code won't have to give the item count. We can just give the items because everything else depends on the item. So we'll have a list where we just pass in the data source or the items. I'll just call it items. And then inside we will have all of this code. We won't have the index aware list item even available to the user. Well, like we will, but in terms of the encapsulation, we can keep this hidden if we wanted to. All we'll pass in is the item created, and we'll pass back the index so that the outside user can decide at this point what they want to do. So all of this will be hidden. Only this code will have, and the index will be coming from the callback function. This will stay the same because that is the UI that the user wants to define from the outside. So yeah, we can start by building that. We'll create a new widget for ourselves. We'll call it continuous scrolling list for dot. We'll import m, and then we'll create a new stateless widget called continuous scrolling list. Now if something like this exists, I apologize. The only reason I'm doing this is to show you the way I create my tutorials, and this is the next tutorial. And by the end of this, you should see the production code that I'll be sharing with you, and then you'll see how I get to that point. So I'm just going to copy all of that for now. We'll return that. And then what we want is a list of items. We can type that, and I'll just call this items. This just means we can pass in any type, so it won't be specific to the string type that we just passed in. We'll use these items, the index aware we can import, and we'll move this out. What we'll do is pass in a callback function that takes an integer, and we'll just say we'll actually only need this. We want to pass in, I want to tell this list index threshold. This dot index threshold, it's definitely a required property. Oh man, my keyboard keeps switching. It's required, items are required, and then when it gets to the index threshold, we want to have a function that returns an integer. We don't have to know the index. Actually, we do. Returns an integer, threshold reached. This will also be required. This dot threshold reached. This will be moved out. So let's leave that for now. Actually, let's comment it out. So when that is reached, we'll go and say threshold reached, and we'll pass in the index. Then as we get back to the home view, we want to use our continuous scrolling list, and we can now give it an index threshold. We have our threshold set up as limit request threshold. The items we'll pass in will be the items from the model, and the threshold reached function will provide us an index where we can then use the schedule binding, add a post frame callback for the duration, and on that we can then use and we can request more data, and we'll pass in index divided by the threshold, which will do the request for us. And what's the other thing? Key. We don't need to pass in the key. Let's just see if that does anything. Oh yeah, there's no value to the thing. So the continuous scrolling list, the child next where this needs to have a child, which will be all of the, no, where's all my UI? Here we go. This needs to take in a child, which will pass in as the item list item, and we'll pass the list item through here. And then in the home view for the continuous scrolling list, we can pass in a list item, which will be this container, and that will be it. We'll use the model items. No, that's not gonna work. We need the index on the outside. Maybe we'll just pass the builder. We'll pass the complete builder. Instead of this, we will pass in not the list item itself. We'll have a function that takes in a build context and an integer, and this is going to be the item builder, and then we'll pass the item builder directly here. Well, what does that help now? No, here we go. Do we go? Yeah, we will execute the item builder right here, pass it the context and the index, and so on the outside we have an item builder, context, index, and now, yep, we can build it from the outside. So now if we scroll, we see that nothing is happening. Because, why is nothing happening? Threshold reached, it's not being called. Yeah, so once we get here, we want to call threshold reached, and we just want to pass back the index. So if you look at home view, threshold reached, index, why is it not firing? Okay, it's passing 14, but it's not requesting more data. Let's just print out request more data for page with current being at current page, and now we can see what's happening. If we do that, request more data for page with current at 0, and that is, why is that? Because it's going down. What's the index? Print threshold reached and we'll print out the index. Threshold reached, and it's because it should be index plus 1. Actually, should it pass back the index, or should it be passing back, because the way we're checking is we're passing back the item number. I guess we can pass back the item number itself so that we know when we request it we are at the exact number. So it shouldn't be index threshold, it should be item number threshold. And then to make it clearer for anyone else using it, the index of the item in the list of values, not the index of the value in the list, if that makes any sense. So as we go down, we now have this little list view, which didn't take a lot away, but it's a bit more concise. We have this continuous scrolling list. I might not do it this way since I don't think it's adding much more value. We have this item number threshold. We're passing the items. The only thing we have in here is the post frame callback, which is cool. And then we have our list item, which we can, then we have our list item UI, which we can obviously put into a separate file, list item dot, and this will be a stateless widget called list item. And yeah, what we'll have is we'll just pass in the value only. So taking that out, we'll say final string title, this dot title, and we'll set the title there, and we'll set the title here. So most likely in the tutorial, I will be building this list item first separately so that when I do show you the code, you'll see that it'll be a lot less to take in one go. And that'll allow me to have cleaner code for you guys to use, as well as for myself for later on when I come back to this tutorial and I want to implement it again in something. So now we've basically built this continuous scrolling list, which there's something red here. Oh, it's a hash. Continuous scrolling list, and you provided your limit request threshold. So let's just see if I change this to 10, if it will change anything. If I change that to 10 and I scroll, oh, because it's not, so I'll have to do that. Yeah, maybe we can provide a page number as well. So we're requesting page 1. Let's see if we can provide a page number. Threshold reached, but then we'll have to keep track of the page number in here. Maybe that'll be a good addition. No, it won't. No. Yeah, so that's it. It'll be a short tutorial, I guess. I can probably write this up in an hour or so, and then I'll do the actual full tutorial video and put that out next week. Let me know what you guys think about this format, and I want to try something different. I want to do some more long form stuff so I can answer some of the questions on the Slack as well as in the comments, and then give more insights into why I'm telling you guys to do some stuff in certain ways. And yeah, so leave a comment below if you like this or what I can change, and then I'll see you guys in the tutorial next week.